Hello, my whoop friends. In this 75mm tiny whoop thrust test video, there are some surprises for some of you. Not for all of us. But even for me, as a very experienced tiny whoop builder and pro pilot, there were 2 or 3 surprises, which I will talk about later in the video. A small warning at the beginning. This is a long video. Use the chapters to navigate through the video. I recommend watching the whole video if you are not yet very experienced in the tiny whoop FPV hobby. If you watch the whole video, it will change your view of tiny whoops. I can promise you that. Unless you are already very experienced like me. I made the chapters for the experienced pilots. That way, the experienced pilots can jump to the chapter that interests them the most. I hope you enjoy the video. After my last big 65mm tiny whoop static thrust test, it is now time for the big 75mm tiny whoop thrust test. Just like with the 65mm thrust test, it is quite clear that higher kV from the same manufacturer means more static thrust, or in other words, more power. And just like with the 65mm thrust test, there are some small surprises. With this static thrust test, I want to give you an overview of the current power situation for 75mm tiny whoops, or in other words, for tiny whoops with 40mm propellers. This static thrust test is not accurate down to the gram, but it does not have to be, because my goal is simply to give you an overview of the overall situation, so that you can see that there are basically no miracle motors. The biggest difference between the motors is definitely the kV, which in turn determines the maximum peak power. And peak power basically determines how sporty the tiny whoop feels in the air. Of course, everyone can and must decide for themselves which motor and which kV is right for them. And peak power is not everything. Depending on your flying style, other factors such as sustained full throttle performance over a longer period of time or efficiency, and therefore flight time, can be more important. I leave that decision up to you. Only you know your goals and needs. With this test, I only give you the data so that hopefully you can make a better decision. For me personally, the results of this static 75mm tiny whoop thrust test match my flight experience. I have flown all of these tiny whoops over many flights, and I have to say that the results of this static thrust test did not really surprise me. The strongest bind and fly tiny whoop in the world is and remains the Beta FPV Air 75-2 Champion Edition tiny whoop. That does not change. What surprised me a little, however, is the kV rating of the Beta FPV Air 75-2 race tiny whoop, which in my opinion deviates quite a bit. I think the Beta FPV 0802 25,000 kV motors probably have the same kV as the Beta FPV 0802 28,000 kV motors, with the only difference being that the 25,000 kV motor has motor plugs and the 28,000 kV motor does not. Or the bushings of the 25,000 kV motors are that much better than the ball bearings of the 28,000 kV motor, which I cannot really imagine. In any case, you now know that the Beta FPV 0802 25,000 kV motor delivers almost the same maximum thrust as the Beta FPV 0802 28,000 kV motor. What also surprised me a little is that the RC Power 1002 22,000 kV motor delivers so little thrust. But it makes perfect sense because it is only a 22,000 kV motor. This motor just somehow feels very good in the air to me personally. But when I flew again with this motor after this static thrust test, I had to say that it is absolutely true that the maximum thrust in flight is not as high as with other motors, such as the RC Power 0802 27,000 kV motors or the Beta FPV 0802 28,000 kV motors. Those were the 2 small surprises for me in this static thrust test. And something that was not really a surprise, but still interesting, was that the GEPRC 1002 25,000 kV motor with real 12 amp ESCs with 3x3mm MOSFETs was able to deliver good thrust of over 200 grams. I am so glad that we finally have real 12 amp ESCs in tiny whoops. Only with them can modern high kV motors unleash their full potential. And even for low kV motors, it seems to be beneficial. Also somewhat surprising was how much maximum thrust a small 0702 motor can deliver when the kV is very high, in this case 36,000 kV, and when the propeller is very light, like in this case with the HQ Prop ultralight 2-blade propeller. That was impressive to see. Unfortunately, I could not do a longer thrust test with this combo because the flight controller was partially defective. I have really flown many 75mm tiny whoops in my life, with all motor sizes, kV ratings, and propellers. And in the end, I unfortunately have to tell you that there are no miracle motors, and no miracle propellers either. Of course, there are good combos, and of course, some setups feel great for the moment. But every combo and every motor size and type has an advantage in one area and a disadvantage somewhere else. When you have been in the hobby as long as I have and tried as much as I have, you inevitably come to the conclusion that here in the year 2026, we are slowly reaching the end of what is possible, and that there will be no more clearly noticeable changes for pro pilots unless there are major fundamental technical changes. The biggest and most important changes in recent years were firstly the BlueJay ESC firmware with 96 kHz PWM frequency, which made more efficient flying with high kV motors possible. Secondly, the BetaFPV BT 2.0, the GNB A30, and the newbie drone NX69 battery connectors. Thirdly, the powerful LiPos with very high C rates, such as the Tatu 75C and 95C LiPos, the BetaFPV Lava 2 95C LiPos, the Dogcom 550 mAh 150C and Alien RC 450 mAh 150C LiPos, and the GNB 80C and 100C LiPos. And fourthly, the real 12 Amp ESCs with 3x3mm MOSFETs. Together with AWG20 battery leads, lighter whoop frames made from better material, and small things like titanium or Rennie motor screws and directly soldered motors, this led to the birth of the most powerful 75mm bind and fly tiny whoop in the world, the BetaFPV Air 75 2 Champion Edition. Of course, even this tiny whoop can still be improved a bit, for example with AWG20 battery leads, and a better canopy and titanium screws. But overall, I would say that with this bind and fly tiny whoop, we have reached the maximum. For further major improvements, there would need to be a big and significant revolution in battery technology or motor technology, a completely new design. The positive side of all this is that it is a very good time to start with tiny whoop FPV flying. It is easier than ever to enter the hobby with almost the greatest possible power using the BetaFPV Air 75 2 Champion Edition. Or for those pilots who want motor plugs with the BetaFPV Air 75 2 Race Edition. Building a 75mm tiny whoop completely from scratch still remains attractive, but it is no longer absolutely necessary to achieve very high performance thanks to today's bind and fly tiny whoops. That means for me personally, there is nothing left to do except continue dreaming of my dream tiny whoop motor, which has the response of 803 motors, the efficiency of low kV 802 or 1002 motors, and the power of high kV 1002 and 802 motors. That would be the absolute dream. Together with real-life 150C LiPos with 3 to 4 times the capacity of today's LiPos at the same weight, so that 6 minutes of full send flight would be possible. That would be the ultimate tiny whoop, my whoop friends. I hope I can give you a good overview of the power of 75mm tiny whoops with this video and broaden your horizons. And maybe you will not have to make the same mistakes as I did and can start directly with the best possible equipment. But honestly, the most valuable thing for me was exactly that experimenting and making mistakes. Experiencing it myself, learning new things, and in some cases even relearning them 2 or 3 times, revising opinions and experiences, experiencing things again in a new way. Until now, where I can truly say that there is not much new left for me to learn in this hobby. Only small things. But because of that, I now have more time for good and special videos that do not yet exist on YouTube. Like this one. Unfortunately, I am slowly losing a bit of motivation for it. Please write in the comments which video you would like to see from me next. It should be a video that does not yet exist on YouTube. Please also write why you think I should make the video you suggest. I will continue trying to make videos, but it strongly depends on how well the tiny whoop community cooperates with me and whether I can find a good sponsor. At the moment, I still have hope. Hope dies last, my whoop friends. I will look at all comments and then decide which videos I will make in the future. I definitely want to make more videos in the future where I know in advance that many people really want to see them and where I know that the video doesn't yet exist on YouTube. Thank you very much in advance for your help, my whoop friends. Use the chapters to navigate through the rest of the video. If you watch the whole video, it will change your view on tiny whoops. I can promise you that. Unless you are already very experienced like me. I wish you lots of fun with the rest of the video. Check out my many tutorials on this YouTube channel, into which I have invested a lot of work. Use the channel search function to find a video or use the playlists. And if you would like to support my work further, I would appreciate a small donation on Ko-fi.com. The link is also in the video description. Thank you very much for your support, my whoop friends. Check out my many tutorials on this YouTube channel, into which I have invested a lot of work. Use the channel search function to find a video or use the playlists. And if you would like to support my work further, I would appreciate a small donation on Ko-fi.com. The link is also in the video description. Thank you very much for your support, my whoop friends.
Telemetry recovered.
Check out my many tutorials on this YouTube channel, into which I have invested a lot of work. Use the channel search function to find a video or use the playlists. And if you would like to support my work further, I would appreciate a small donation on Ko-fi.com. The link is also in the video description. Thank you very much for your support, my whoop friends. If you want to use motor plugs, then I recommend applying a contact enhancer. That probably gives a bit more performance and reduces the risk of contact corrosion or electrical fretting. Check out my many tutorials on this YouTube channel, into which I have invested a lot of work. Use the channel search function to find a video or use the playlists. And if you would like to support my work further, I would appreciate a small donation on Ko-fi.com. The link is also in the video description. Thank you very much for your support, my whoop friends. Check out my many tutorials on this YouTube channel, into which I have invested a lot of work. Use the channel search function to find a video or use the playlists. And if you would like to support my work further, I would appreciate a small donation on Ko-fi.com. The link is also in the video description. Thank you very much for your support, my whoop friends.
Telemetry lost. Lost.
Check out my many tutorials on this YouTube channel, into which I have invested a lot of work. Use the channel search function to find a video or use the playlists. And if you would like to support my work further, I would appreciate a small donation on Ko-fi.com. The link is also in the video description. Thank you very much for your support, my whoop friends. Stay tuned for future videos and check out my many tutorials on this YouTube channel, into which I have invested a lot of work. Use the channel search function to find a video or use the playlists.
Some additional information can be found in the video description. Please watch my many other tutorials on this YouTube channel if you want to know more about how to modify a tiny boop or how to learn FPV flying and racing.